This recording is made on Thursday, July 10th for MRK460. So what I wanted to do was just go to scan down the whole page with some comments to let you know what we've covered so far and where we're going. I have you for 6 classes, and this is halfway through the 4th week, so some of you will have had me for 4 classes and some of you have just had me for 3, but we're just a little bit over halfway. So I wanted to help you know where you should be going with your reading, because you seem to just be having fun talk with me in the class, and that's great, and I like the feedback, but you also have to do more reading of the content on the web page. So I'm going to point out what those specific things are so you can follow along. Right, so scrolling down the page here after the intro, which is self-explanatory, and reminding people to read the newspaper on a regular basis. I want to make sure you watch these 2 videos about grizzly bear stories so you understand what I'm talking about in terms of storytelling and why you should remember the things I tell you, like the situation with the situation with GoPro, the story about Canada goose, the story about blackberry, and those kinds of things. Those are little stories that you should collect, and then in the future you can use them in job interviews or in working with your company. Also, one of the big things I want to make sure is that you understood what the course was about in terms of things like Ansov's matrix and the different types of opportunities. So when we're talking about global marketing, we're talking about selling beyond the existing customers because there's pressure on the company to do so. So that's what we focus on, market development as opposed to market penetration, because what you're presuming is that market penetration is maxed out. You just can't get any more customers in Canada because everybody who wanted to buy your product has already bought it. So the only way you can make more money is to go outside to some other countries, and that causes you to then deal with your 4 Ps and the 6 Es. The point being that you cannot sell the same product, the same price, and using the same promotion in the same places because you're now overseas. So how that relates to the 6 environments is that you have to now look at how all those 6 environments are going to be slightly different in your different target market regions, and then adapt your product and your pricing and your promotion and locations accordingly. That's the big point right there. Competition. I had sort of moved this up from what was further down on the list there. This is a very important point about competition, and a lot of people, when they're thinking about competition, understand that, yeah, Coke, Pepsi for sure, but sometimes competition has come from a different category like iced tea, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure you read this section to know the different kinds of competition. This is also a very important point for the course, not just for what you could use in my class, but other classes as well, where you get information from. Information doesn't come from the internet. It comes from things that are posted on the internet, like government agencies or trade associations. And the trade associations ones is very, very useful, not only for job hunting and job interviews, but also for getting information about the company situation you're doing as a project for the course. Globalization. I'm trying to now match the things here in the order of the chapters in the textbook. So globalization was mentioned in the 2nd or 3rd class, but actually it comes from chapter number 1 in the textbook. I had talked about winter rims in one class, but not the other 2, so I'll to make sure I come back to that. And then the whole thing with BlackBerry and Canada Goose, and talking about the target market segmentation. Sustainable development. A lot of people understand that means not cutting down all the trees presently because you'll have no trees to grow for the future, but it also goes towards dealing with cleanliness of water for drinking, and also the oceans and the lakes for fishing and other things like that. I didn't get into this because this is out of date, but it's important that you do know who Canada's top companies are. The cultural environment, I love this picture. 3, 4. I mean, there's all kinds of places around the world where people are killing each other because they're looking at the same damn thing and misunderstanding it. And this is why it's important to understand the cultural environment. And then diasporas. And a lot of students said they're quite interested about the fact that I had actually been making this big list of all these countries and populating it with information from the students. So I would have a Chinese student commenting on how to do business in China, and not just cutting and pasting things out of Wikipedia, but your own personal experiences. So an Australian or an Indian student could look at this and say, yeah, that was important now, but this is 2021 and COVID's changed things. So we don't necessarily do singing and dancing in commercials because that's kind of sort of old school. So I want you to go through here, and if there's a country that your parents or grandparents or yourself is from, please just send me an email to update some things, and I'll add them in there. Hofstede. Yeah, Hofstede was interesting because he's used and quoted by a lot of companies in order to be able to understand the different ways that you can deal with a culture. And even though you don't understand the language, there's certain things like how men and women get along, or how rich people, poor people get along, or how individuals versus group dynamic get along. That's why it was important to understand about Hofstede. Now this video here, the reason I keep showing this to you is it's a great example of what students did for the course. It ends up being sort of a legacy contribution that lasts for many, many years as a teachable point. I would love it this summer if 3 or 4 students got together and made something like that for one of the upcoming topics that I could show to students 5, 10 years now. Well, not 10 years now, I'll be long retired by then, but okay. And then last class on Wednesday class on June 9th, we did talk about viral marketing. We got most of it done, but you should read some more about asymmetrical and guerrilla marketing. The reason why I talk about this is because most companies don't have a lot of money to spend on their marketing promotions campaigns, so they want to get maximum results for a smaller amount of effort. They can't spend $5 million on creating a commercial for the Super Bowl. But what they could do is create a little funny thing or a parody or a joke, and it ends up being picked up on somebody's YouTube channel and passed along, and next thing you know, it becomes a news story because it went viral and there's 5 gazillion hits on it. So the question is, how do you make things like that? And that question is probably going to be asked of you in job interviews. How crazy is your imagination? Could you come up with a viral video for us that we could use? And it's helpful to look at some previous examples and which ones are successful and not successful. The Jamaican Volkswagen ad got a lot of controversy. Also, cultural appropriation ones like the Toyota Swagger wagon, and also the Indian partition video was also a very good one. I don't know how much we'll have a chance to get into ethics and bribery in this week's class. We'll probably have to do some of it next week. But it's a big subject because so many companies are getting called out on this. Everybody has a cell phone on them, and everybody's cell phone can record in video and audio, and that's why so many people are getting caught. It's just like Will Smith, famous black comedian, said, it's not that more people are being racist, it's that more people are being filmed being racist. And we'll talk about corporate social responsibility, which is one of the things that people look for when they're hiring someone, is to make sure that their personal ethics are good, and they ask questions about that, and also whistleblowers. We'll talk about the situation in Toyota and the sticky pedal, which I was involved in, and I already talked about the word stakeholders previously, and we're not going to get into this theory stuff because it won't relate to anything you need to know. I moved this up from further on, and it's now into the chapter 5, which actually is mentioned briefly, first mover advantages. Me and Steve Litt, I've known each other for like 40 years or something, and we did this little discussion of why sometimes you have a situation where the early bird gets a worm. So you've got the company that invented the concept of the browser, which is Netscape, but then how did that end up losing it to Firefox and Google Chrome and other ones? And these two videos together are something that's very useful, and you should watch them and make some comments on it. Crown corporations I mentioned in class on Wednesday, June 9th, and I'll mention it today on Thursday, June 10th, and a little bit on Friday, June 11th as well. We talked about embassies and consulates, and now you understand that. And we also talked about in the June 9th class on buying and selling to government, because that's a big thing. Imagine you're Ford Canada and you get the contract to supply the new police cars for the OPP. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit how government can be a good customer for you, and foreign governments as well. For example, there's many IT companies in Canada or companies involved in medical devices that sell to government departments in other countries. and some of the government influence on trade, tariffs. This is actually kind of an interesting video because what I did was I walked around the classroom talking about the different things related to tariffs, and then one of my students took the video and kind of pimped it up and put some music in it and some little graphics, and it's all the students in the class giving real life examples of what are some tariffs. The dumping CBSA video was also interesting because it was very short, just 1 minute 10 seconds or so, but explained an interesting concept using the BlackBerry phone. I didn't have a chance to mention that, but that was actually kind of a humorous one about what border services agents do. This video here I did about 15 years ago, one of the first time I was on TV, and there's so many things that came out of this video, like our weather extremes getting worse, and also contingency plans, and a very important story about, which I'll tell you in class, about a medical emergency and what are the contingency plans for that, and also some weather extremes on the food system. Now, for next week's class, what I want you to do is watch these 3 videos right here. This one is sort of an introduction to why Canada and US are different. I talk about history, geography, where people live, and how they use the land. This one is a little bit more interesting because it talks about the difference between North America and Europe. One of the main points being that there's so many countries here with large populations but completely different language. Whereas basically here it's English and Spanish with allowances for Quebec and French. But the difficulty with doing business in Europe is you can't just sell to the English. The Germans would want some, and the French, and the Italians, and those are all, 60 million, 80 million people, right? So that means you have to change the labeling on your products. You also have to have 4 different sets of TV commercials and 4 different sets of viral videos in different languages, because if you try to sell something in Germany, it's in French, they won't listen to it. But if you wanted to market stuff in North America, boom, have it in English, and you've already got 370 million people that could see it right away. 3 different orientations, indicators of economic supremacy. This was kind of interesting. We'll get to this next week. I wanted to give you a way of thinking about how you could divide the world up into countries that are big enough to make cars is an indication of how they've got some economic ability to have the car business and the auto parts business, and there's not too many. So then I divided it up also into countries that are big enough and have enough technology to make phones, and then planes. So I came up with this whole thing based on the old John Candy movie, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And so I had 4 columns, and then one student said, well, what about phones? Because that's a good indication. So if a country has an economy and a technology and a labor force that they can make planes, and Canada has that with Bombardier, and also trains, and also cars, and also smartphones, then you would think they got their act together pretty good. And there's not too many countries that do all 4. Where's the name of a country that produces planes, trains, automobiles, and phones? I think maybe USA would be across all those. Probably China would be, maybe Japan. England used to, but England doesn't make trains now. Okay. And we're going to pause for right there because that's how far we've come, and this part going into Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 will be next week. So that's my sort of coverage of what we've done in the first 3.5 classes, and I hope that that's helpful for you.